So, and then on the way back, so I was just surprised how much it was the topic of the conversation. It was fun.
You weren't expecting that, were you?
I wasn't too surprised. But.
That was fun. Yeah, Ken will talk to his wife a little bit. All right, Scott.
It's like a counseling session.
I'll send an invoice. Skylar, you think who's next?
Eric. Hi, Eric Lothiak. I'm a learner, evidently. I knew that. There were a lot of surprises for me. I think I understood why I ranked as I did in every category. I think what appealed to me most, or maybe when I had an aha moment, was this idea of looking, this matrix thing where we look across and see where all our strengths are and figure out where to team up. Right? It was a stage, I thought that was a very clever and intelligent way to go about things to maximize strengths. So I'm looking forward to it.
I'm Margaret, and I'm an achiever, and I'm going to piggyback off of what Eric has said with my conversation. I enjoyed understanding what complements my strengths, and as the leader here at LCCA, I'm prone to looking for compensations for my own weaknesses, I guess. So I'm in hiring season as well, so it was just appropriately timed as I'm looking to fill some roles and fill some spots and continue to build a really strong team here. It's good to know myself so that I can know who best to invite to our team. So
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you, Margaret. All right, you've got 3 choices.
Ellen, go ahead.
Yes, Ellen Nowak. I'm responsible, which didn't surprise me. Actually, I did this test, I was telling you, it had to be 18 years ago. It's under a different name. And I wish I could find the results, but that's not going to happen. So, not responsible for keeping that kind of stuff. But no, it did not surprise me. I was telling her, just the other day before I talked to her, my one sister had said, well, you're the responsible one in the family. So, yeah, which is why I get tasked with doing all kinds of fun stuff. Yeah.
So I don't think you mean the word fun, but we're going.
Yes, no.
Euphemism. John?
Sure. Let's see. So my number one was futuristic. Oh, by the way, John Wu, new board member as well. Futuristic, that wasn't surprising, particularly when number 2 is analytical. So it kind of just aligns with what I've spent most.
That's what you do.
Yeah. So that, that's about it.
Wonderful. Randy.
Best for last.
Yes, I'm Randy. My strength was learner, and I talked to Scott, and he was kind of giving me examples of my life before I even said anything of what I do and what I think about and how I think. So I felt pretty easy to figure out, or Scott was hiding in the bushes now.
We've got cameras everywhere.
I've done a lot of these, but I found it probably the most useful one.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Anything else that you need to take care of, Randy, before I jump into stuff? Okay, so make sure we're good there. All right, so you got the report. While we were waiting, I saw a lot of you kind of looking through what's here. Before I get into that, I'm going to just do one side note before I forget. I was just asked to remind you or let you know that you're going to be getting an email from my colleague in the next day or 2 regarding the strategic plan. We didn't want to bombard you with that before this, so like I said, in a day or 2, you're going to get an email with some information, some direction on pre-work for the strategic planning process. And just so some of you might understand, but I'll just explain what we're going to be asking of you. That we're going to be asking you to think of your top 2 or 3 challenges that you see for the organization. The top 2 to 3 challenges, top 2 to 3 opportunities, and then top 1 or 2 long-range goals. And so what you're going to do is you're going to fill out this form, and all of that will be in the email as well. And I see you taking notes, so that's okay, but that'll be reiterated. So you're going to fill out this form. We're going to get it from everybody. We're going to have your name, but it stays there, okay? So then what we're going to do is we're going to aggregate everything that you have. We're going to take the names off of it, and then when you have the strategic planning process, we're going to go through all of those and then That's the beginning of the strategic planning process. Any questions on that? Okay. All right, I just want you to know that that's coming. I will probably, Margaret, I or somebody from the team will just let you know that it's there. I would say if you don't see it by the end of the week, red flag, raise your hand, let us know, maybe you got caught in spam or something. Sound good? All right, so, gonna come back to today. And so I saw you looking at the report. I just want to point out a couple things that you're gonna, I would say probably staying on page 3 is probably where you might live for most of today. It's just kind of a great refresher. My encouragement would be for you to get comfortable with what your top 8 strengths are. Because in about 45 minutes, we're gonna be talking about each strength one at a time. And there's gonna be interaction. So you don't have to hear my voice all 4 hours. I know you want to, but you don't have to. So my hope at the end of today is you start to know what your top 8 strengths are. So I want you to know that. And then a couple other things I'm just gonna point out to you that we're gonna talk more later on. But starting at page 5 through 7, you're going to see all 34 strengths listed out with who in this room has this strength. So for example, the first one is focus, and it shows that Emily and Lori have the strength of focus. And if you go down a little bit, like in the middle of the page, you see self-assurance or you see deliberative, and it says partner up opportunity. I'm jumping ahead here, but that means that there's nobody in this room that has those strengths. Okay. So Margaret, to what you were saying, where you're like, oh, who can I partner up with? Who's going to complement me really well, right? You can look on here to say, hey, I should partner up with somebody who has strategic. Okay, well, who has strategic? Or partner up with context. Who has context? That's where this can come in really handy. And then page 8 and page 9, we're going to talk about way at the end, but if you're curious, on page 8 shows how many of you, it's a frequency chart, has each of the strengths. Probably a little hard to read, but we'll talk through those. And then on page 9, it's just going to show you a gap analysis. So at the end, I'm going to talk to you about the analysis of what we're seeing. So as Randy was saying, wow, it was scary. It's crazy how much Scott actually knew about me. I'm wondering if there's cameras there, right? We don't, like I tell people, I'm not psychic and I do not stalk people, but sometimes it can feel that way, okay? But again, we don't hit it out of the park every single time, right? As we talk through strengths, strengths is just one component of who you are. So I just want you to know that you've got all of that information in the report, and I'll talk through more of it as we get going, but in case you're curious and looking ahead. Any questions before I jump in? All right. So my encouragement for you today is to think about taking the word weakness out of your vocabulary and replacing with partner up opportunities. You're not good at everything. Nobody is, right? It's understanding what you are good at and how you can find people around you to complement you. That's really what today is all about. And not being jealous or envious of anybody else, to say, hey, you know what, you and I could collaborate really well together as we think about the best end goal. So when we think about Clifton's strengths, we say, okay, this is great, we take this assessment, but if you take the assessment and never do anything with it, right, what's the point? So with this, we can have the individual coaching, which we've all done. Today is more focused on team building, and then as we think about the way forward, the strategic planning and putting together project teams going forward, it's what is the diversity in roles, right? To say, let's make sure there's different expertise, right, subject matter experts, but there's also strengths as well. So it's how we approach different situations, and then if we're putting together different project teams. So this is laying that foundation. So we realize that we have one body and we have many parts, right? Wouldn't it be kind of weird if all of us on our feet said they wanted to be able to see, right? And our mouth said that they wanted to be able to have heartbeat, right? Kind of odd. You don't think about those types of things, but the same thing for all of you. You are each one part of this body of LCCA, right? And it's okay to say, I'm not going to be everything to everybody. I can't do everything. And how can we make sure that as the board here, as the organization as a whole, we're finding the right people to fill in those gaps instead of feeling like we have to be everything. So understand that we are all born with talents, and it's up to us to develop them into strengths. So for example, if you see the definition of the talent up there, it's just this natural ability. It's how you respond to things, right? So if a situation happens with 2 students or 2 people and they start arguing, right, some of us are going to want to just try to diffuse the situation. Some of us are going to think about the emotions. Some of us are going to think about what is the issue? How can we best solve it, right? Well, when we think of it as a strength, it's consistent near perfect performance in an activity. So that's what happens with our talents developing the strengths. So let's pick on the woos in the room, right? Skylar and Georgia, right? Woo is number 1, so it stands for winning others over. So as most of us, whether we are parents or not, when we think of talking to little children, right, we say don't talk to strangers, right? right? We're trying to protect them, keep them safe. Well, the woos are like, but I want to talk to strangers, they're fun, right? So Skylar and Georgia, when you were young, were you making friends on the playground all the time? Yeah, still to this day, you're always making friends with strangers, right? So it's the idea of the talent is you're naturally meeting people. But if we develop it into strengths, it's the idea of you're purposefully meeting people to connect them, to say, hey, I think I can connect you to this cause. I can connect you to somebody else who has a similar interest and see where it goes from there, right? So that's how we can play out with what we're talking about today. So I actually say that I don't believe that any of you should be well-rounded. And I know I'm in a school and you're like, well, Tiffany, I kind of disagree with you there. But what I'm saying is, when I say I don't want you to be well-rounded, I don't want you to think that you have to be good at everything, right? You're not first in every single thing. But can you be first as a team? So I want the team to be well-rounded, and I want you to be what we say is edgy, right? It's thinking of the puzzle piece, like where do you fit? Where are your specific strengths? And where you don't fit in, who else can come in and fill in that gap? That's what we talk about today. I do want to say, feel free to jump in at any time with questions or comments. I want this to be completely casual, especially if you have them. I want to make sure you don't say, oh, I was going to ask something that I forgot. I'm really good at that. All right, so I'd ask for your honesty. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Raise your hand if when you found out you had to take an assessment, spend 90 minutes with one of us, and now do this 4-hour session on top of everything else you have in your job. Were you like, why are we doing this? Maybe you said it or maybe you thought it. Anybody? Thank you. I appreciate all the hesitation too. All right. Well, I thank you for being here, and that's completely good, right? And what I'll say is the data will support why we do what we do. So are we all familiar with Gallup, right? They've kind of got political polls and all that stuff. We're not going to get into politics today, but they also do engagement studies. So first we're going to talk about this turquoise color here, the lighter blue. So let me explain what these 3 definitions mean. So they do what's called a Q12 survey, and they ask you 12 questions to determine your engagement in your organization. So 3 out of 10 employees are engaged in what they do. So 3 out of 10 people love their job. Brand ambassador, go above and beyond. I know you're scheduled till 4, but you stay till 4:30 just because you really care and you want to help somebody out, whatever that looks like. 3 out of 10 go above and beyond. Next number, not engaged, 53%, half. Half the population, yes.
This is not specific to
No,
LCCA.
no,
This is
this
Gallup in general.
Gallup in general.
Just
You're like, oh, we got a problem. I apologize that that was not clear.
It probably was.
No. Please,
I needed to hear it.
please ask those questions. No, this is actually over the last 20 years, and actually this is the latest data. And I'll kind of get to that. I'm sorry. Thank you for asking that and clarifying. This is not LCCA. We did not do this for LCCA. So half just come to work to collect a paycheck, right? We have bills, we have a car, we have a house, we want to keep those things, so you know what, I just need a job. And then the top one, actively disengaged, is at 17%. We all know these people. They are the saboteurs. They are the people that are just so upset, right? It's the end of the school year, Margaret gives me a 2% raise. I'm like, I worked so hard, I should have gotten more. So then I go to Skylar, and Skylar's got me, we're gonna chat for a while, and then eventually she's gonna be like, I've got other stuff to do. Then I'm going to Eric, right? And then we go down the line. So it's the idea of I'm really frustrated here, and I'm gonna let everybody know that I'm frustrated. And it's the idea that you can't do anything to please me. And I'm creating all these comments, and now all of you that maybe loved what you're doing are thinking, do you want to stay here? Well, I didn't realize that, right? So it's creating this toxicity, this cancerous type culture. So again, Georgia, just want to reiterate, yeah, this is across the United States, all industries, so not even just education. So then Gallup will take all that information, and the subset that they grab is when U.S. workers and leaders work from their strengths. So when they know organizations are really incorporating strengths and they're investing in their individuals and investing in their culture, engagement jumps to 73%. Not engaged goes down to 26%, and actively disengaged goes down to 1%.
How do they measure that? How do they know that? Is that self-report?
Yes. Yeah, and Gallup actually works with a lot of organizations as well. So like I'm Gallup certified, so if I wanted to report this, I could, but they have a lot of Gallup employees that will do the reporting on this as well.
Okay.
Yeah. But I want to go back to this 30% number, right? The one that probably scared Georgia there. Like, wow, that's not good. So 3 out of 10 people love their job, go above and beyond. my first question is, does that feel high or low to you?
Low in an education session. I think teachers tend to.
So it feels low, I think, what I heard for the most part. My next question is, but are you surprised? And I want to point out to what you said, Margaret. I don't have the industry specifics. I don't usually report on that, but you're right. It could vary, right? And actually, I've worked with some educators who actually will say the opposite of what you do, Margaret. Where yes, there's a lot of you that go above and beyond, but then there's a lot that are just like, you know, I'm doing the bare minimum. You know, so there can't. The good news is this isn't a representation of LCCA, right? And I'm not here to tell you what it is. I don't know, but it's just looking at the overall data to say, when U.S. workers and leaders are working from their strengths, again, have you ever quit a job because your boss was amazing? Right, you don't really do that. Every once in a while somebody will say, well, yeah, I left a really good boss, but I moved, right? I changed locations, things like that because of my spouse. But typically you're not leaving. So Gallup has information that says you're typically leaving because of your direct manager, right? They don't see you for who you are, they're not helping you to develop. But if your leader is seeing you for who you are, seeing your strengths and saying, I want to develop you and I want you to keep being you, that's the value, that's why I hired you, well, of course you're going to stay. And that's really what this is all about. So at the end of 2024, Gallup released this data, and it's an 11-year low, right? So it's a big concern that overall, and I don't know about you, I mean, maybe think about your parents. I don't think about my parents. They hated their job, right? So I was raised to understand that, you know what, it's just a part of life. My parents didn't like my job, so I'm not gonna like my job. I just have to do something to get paid. So if we can really think about this to say, let's keep getting the root issue, right? As individuals, let's love our job. Let's show our kids how they can love their job. In a school setting, help the children see that they're not gonna be A students in everything possibly, but hey, what do you wanna do in life and make sure that you have the education to help you be successful in whatever you decide. So I'll pause there. Questions, comments on any of that?
Can I ask a
You may.
non-relevant question?
No.
I was wondering, like, is that been a slow downward trend, the 11-year, or is there's some sort of drop after
COVID, yeah. So interestingly, so I used to update the slide like every month, and then I'm like, I'm done because it was so bad. Every month Gallup would release new data, and right after, so it was actually trending upward for about 15 years, and then in 2020, COVID happened, and it actually went up. It went up through 2021. People got to, maybe not in this room, right, a lot of times, but you got to work from home, you had more flexibility, you felt like as an employee, you in a way had the upper hand. So it went up, and then all of a sudden employers started realizing, yeah, this work from home thing isn't all cracked up to be. It can be, but a lot of people were possibly taking advantage of it, great resignation, some people having 2 jobs working from home kind of thing. So then it's steadily declined from 2021, and it's still declining. A lot of time gets spent out here, right? Just thinking through what all this means, right? And when we think of educators, to say how can we even go back to the student level? So there's something called the engagement cliff, right? So when I think back to kindergarten or 4th grade, I loved it, right? We had recess, right? Got to spend time outside. Kindergarten, I got nap time. I really feel like we should bring that back. Personally, that'd be nice. Of course, some of you are like, oh, we don't really nap, but. So it's the idea of thinking, right, we loved it. And then all of a sudden you think maybe not everybody in this room, but by the time you get to high school, the data shows that only 1 in 3 high school students love school, right? It's harder, right? Now it's like there's all this added pressure. So if we can bring this into the schools and help the children understand, like you can't do something that you have passion in, to say, I'm gonna actually love what I'm doing, and all this can change, right? Getting to the root issue. Questions, comments on that? All right. So some of you have said you've taken this assessment before. Some of you said you've taken other assessments. The 2 primary reasons, we talked about this in the one-on-one, that we use this assessment. Number 1, positive psychology, right? I want to lift you up and to help you to see who you are gifted to be and the value you bring to this organization. And then secondly, it showcases how unique we truly are. So I love numbers. I'm analytical. There's a 1 in 33 million chance of you and I having the same top 5 in the same order. And when we get to specific strengths, what I'm going to tell you is there are a number of you in this room that have a strength that nobody else in this room has. So at certain points when you bring something up in a meeting, you might be like, don't you see it? You guys, don't you see what I'm talking about? Nope, we don't. We don't have that strength, we don't have your experience, and that's okay. And that's really where I want to encourage you, especially if you're the only one standing up and voicing something. I want you to do that, right? That's what makes this organization so great. We can talk about it ahead of time so we can get to the true issue and true solution in a quicker way. All right, some people will also ask us, well, all right, Tiffany, I feel like I change a lot. And again, Ellen, if you ever find your old results, I would love to use this as a good example. I took this assessment twice, 4 years apart, different organizations, and of my top 8 strengths, 1 changed. Now, when I talk about changing, I'm saying, bigger number. Usually, if you retake it, where, responsibility for Ellen is 1 now, maybe before it was number 3. We don't say that that's a change, but again, if all of a sudden Skylar with his woo at number 1, it becomes number 34, it's like that doesn't make sense, right? That's probably not going to happen. So really it is kind of 80% of who you are at birth and 20% through life experiences. And I want to point out, we talk about the pyramids here. So if you think of a pyramid, right, we want a solid, healthy foundation before we're able to really use our strengths up here. So today we're talking about the top of the pyramid, but we do want to acknowledge and recognize that we need to be founded on good values, right? That it's not about me trying to steal money from you and make as much money as I can, right? It's the idea of how can we have those good values to say we're all out here trying to help make a difference in individuals' lives. And you can think about your values for the school as well. Virtues, right? Prudence, justice, faithful, love, all of that is important. And then we talked about this in your one-on-one, being healthy emotionally, and physically, right? If I didn't sleep well last night, or if I'm dealing with a migraine, I can still come here and do it. But you're gonna be like, yeah, something just seemed off about her, right? Just there's something there, right? We can do our job, but if we can focus on being healthy in those areas, it's just easy to be ourselves, to show up and do more and care about other people and be a part of the team. So yes, we have to address fatal flaws, right, if they're getting in the way, but more is today it's focusing on the strengths and neutralizing those weaknesses, ultimately finding those partner-up opportunities. And then we also teach strengths for others. So it's the idea that your strengths are here to help make LCCA a better place, right? To say, how can we grow? How can we reach more lives? So it's about saying, how can I use my gifts to help you develop your strengths and help the organization as a whole? So I have an activity for you. So I gave you all a pen, so you can't say you don't have a pen. Feel free to find some blank space. I would say the first page is an option. Anywhere, you don't need a lot of space. So I'm going to ask you to do something, but before I do it, I want to say I'm going to explain what I want you to do, but don't do it yet. And for fun, I'm going to time you. Let's see how long this takes. Okay, so what I want you to do when I say go is sign your name as quickly and neatly as possible.
That's new.
Neat.
Don't do it yet though. So sign your name as quickly and neatly as possible. And so when I say go, then when you're done, put your pen down so I know you're done. And like I said, I'm going to time you. And we can maybe make a competition out of this. I know Skylar's got a competition. Does anybody else have competition?
I do.
You, Ellen? Okay, so Ellen and Skylar especially.
Like ready to go.
On your mark. Get set, go.
Yeah, I guess 6 letters.
Yeah, that's not fair, right? Technically. At least you know it. All right. How does it look? Pretty easy?
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, I'm confused by the question. So Margaret, you said your name is new, so it's...
I
still
don't quite have it as quickly as
Okay.
my maiden name for 45 years. So.
Sounds like you have to practice.
I know.
I'm kidding. Okay. Well, here's your chance. So I picked on one of you just over 3 seconds, right? So really what I'm hearing is it's pretty easy to sign your name. You and I could hold a conversation, right? If you were signing for a mortgage, right? You can sign your name, no problem. Okay. So I want competition, the two of you. 3 seconds, you're going to try to beat 3 seconds. And you're going to try to beat each other.
Ooh.
Competition, challenge accepted?
Sure.
Everybody's going to participate, but really I'm focused. Yeah, everybody's participating, but really I'm thinking of the competition. We want to be neater and faster. Neater and faster when I say go.
But it has to be in cursive?
However you did it the first time.
So we're all
Okay.
Yeah.
But before you do it, put your pen in your other hand.
Yep, I knew you were going to do that.
I know, Cammie. Nobody said I was going to be nice today, right?
We have to write with our other hand?
Yeah.
And then that's how you're going to
And it has to be neat.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not gonna happen.
I love the looks. This is
Yes,
fun.
definitely.
On your mark,
Super fun.
get set, go.
month leader.
Wow.
Not bad.
Yeah,
Yours
we're
is
gonna
good.
have
Wow,
Did I can win? Wow.
You're like, I win for neatness.
Yours is great.
I used to write the alphabet.
That
with
is
my
really
left-handed.
good.
Are you
I do some things left-handed.
I'm also-
All right, all right.
Mine doesn't
The alphabet
follow.
with my left-handed.
So I want to mention, so Ellen's looks pretty good. She says she uses both hands for different things. So that every once in a while I get somebody who's a little bit more ambidextrous,
Yeah.
but it's very, very rare. Sometimes people say, yeah, as a kid I broke my hand and so I had to learn to use my other one. Okay, but I want to get back to the competition. I think she won for neatness, but I want to say thank you all for trying. Every once in a while I'll get somebody who's like, I can't even hold the pen and they just drop it. So there's that, but I timed you, right? So the first time was about 3 seconds. The second time it was 6 seconds. And for the sake of this game, right, it's 3 seconds. What's 3 seconds? But let's think about this in terms of if I asked you to all write with your non-dominant hand the rest of today, do you think you could do it?
Not well.
We'd be here long.
Could you have done that if I asked you to do that again right now and hold a conversation with me? You would tune me out, right? You're like, I can't, I'm trying to concentrate, right? Okay, so I want you to think about this activity, writing with your dominant hand versus writing with your non-dominant hand when it comes to strengths. Because when we think of your unique strengths, right, each of your strengths are different, it's what you do naturally without thinking. It takes very little energy for you to do. You're typically faster at it, you're more engaged, you enjoy it, and sometimes you can multitask, right? You can do that while having that conversation, okay? So the next time you're going to say, Tiffany, I hear you, but I'm still going to work on my 35th strength. Okay, fine. You are more than welcome to do that, but realize how much time that's going to take you versus how you could take that time and probably more productively apply it. Make sense? Yeah? And I know, I'm in a school, and you're like, we're still going to learn, and that's okay. But we teach energy management instead of time management. Right? So it's the idea that energy management says that when you're working from your strengths, it takes you less energy to get more done. By show of hands, raise your hand if you enjoy working with Excel spreadsheets. Is it
Do we
just
enjoy
okay,
it?
John, Skylar, Lori,
Yeah.
Eric maybe? Okay, all right. I love Excel spreadsheets. So I'm going to talk about my colleague Scott, who a few of you have met. So when it comes to Excel spreadsheets, he's really good at messing them up. Okay, so when you put formulas in and you say, hey Scott, can you just like edit, the last month data or something, somehow he deletes formulas or he messes them up. I'm like, you know what, from now on, I'm gonna lock all other cells and only let him know what he can edit, or I'm like, just email me and I'll input them in, right? So it's the idea for me, Excel spreadsheets, it's a full tank of gas. I love it, right? So let me do more of it because I'm efficient at it. If I asked him to start an Excel spreadsheet, he will tell you this. He will open up Microsoft Word and get out his calculator. Yeah, okay. Now I'm gonna be clear, right? We tease each other. So we're gonna tease me in a little bit, I promise. And when you meet him, all the rest of you, for the strategic plan, feel free to bring that up and he will own it, right? We talk through that. We're not saying anything that we don't say to his face, or vice versa. So that Excel spreadsheet, that's me. Now, raise your hand if you love reading. Like a good day for you is reading a lot. Okay, all right. Not my thing, right? So those of you who love reading, it's a full tank of gas. Well, I can do it, right? I can read, but we're going to get into this later, but I'm actually over here, right? It's the idea that I can do it, but it takes me way more energy or effort, and the output isn't necessarily as good. Okay? So maybe we need to think about that to say, sure, we have to learn the basics of things, but what should I be volunteering for when it comes to the strategic plan going forward versus somebody else? Am I the best person for it? Right? Let's make sure we're thinking through some of these strengths as we're talking about that with the strategic planning process in the future. Okay, so those of you that didn't raise your hands before that said you love to read. So raise your hand if you're like, I don't really love to read, or I'm actually kind of a slow reader. And by the way, this is me. So raise your hand if you think you're a relatively slow reader. So Georgia and I, okay, so Georgia, you and I will go with that. So you and I, we both go to a reading study. So our baseline is we read about 90 words a minute. Right? And we're like, I need to be better at this, right? I read a lot and I just need to save time. So I'm going to go to a reading study or a reading class to try to speed read, and I go from 90 words a minute to 150. How do you feel about that, Georgia?
Pretty good.
Right? 67% increase, right? That training was helpful. We're really happy about it. So the rest of you that didn't raise your hand that are like, well, I'm a pretty fast reader. Well, guess what? This is you. You started out at 350 words a minute. You went to the same training that George and I went to, and you went to 2,900 words a minute. I know, I'm mad. Are you mad? Like now I don't even feel good about the improvement I made because I went from 90 to 150, and we still haven't even caught up to the baseline of everybody else in this room.
Where is that class? I'll take that.
Nebraska.
All right.
Nebraska. Yes. So, thinking about that, I look at that and say again, if I have to read a lot for my job, I'm going to try to go to this training a couple more times and get better. But at the same time, is that the right thing for me? Can I partner up with somebody else, right? So I was teasing him about my colleague Scott. Well, Scott is a great reader. So now I will take the Excel spreadsheets and I will ask him to read through a lot of things and give me the cliff notes. What do I need to know? So now we're both working from our strengths and we can do more. If we flipped it, right, we're just going to be spinning our wheels, wasting a lot of energy. Thoughts, comments on that or anything so far?
Is that a real class?
Yeah. Yeah. If somebody wants any of the data on this stuff, yeah. So Gallup has shared this Nebraska speed reading case study. I don't know specifics because, let's focus on what's in front of me. But yes, that is true. If enough people ask, then I have to research it so I can share with you guys. But yeah, that's true. All right. Also, I just want to point out, when it comes to strengths, it's not about what you do, but how you do it. So just know that when we look at your strengths, we're not saying, oh, you have to have certain strengths to be successful. It just helps us understand how you're going to approach things versus other people, right? I can talk to a bunch of hedge fund managers. I can talk to a lot of lawyers. I can talk to a lot of teachers, right? You can all have different strengths, and you can all be equally successful. It's just understanding your approach is going to be different than those around you. All right, so we've had the one-on-one with all of you. We've gone over the 8 categories. We're going to, at a high level, just remind you what those are, knowing that some of you we met with weeks ago. I want to point out a couple things. This is on page 2 of your printout. If you ever want to reference it to say, which category is my strength in? Okay. Other things I want to point out to you is some strengths, you're going to notice, have an asterisk after them, like maximizer. That means it's in more than one category. And then there are 4 seeing strengths that are either in problem identification or problem solving. So when you look at the printout on page 3, and if you have any of those strengths and you see that there are 2 colors tied to them, that doesn't mean you have a half a strength. That doesn't mean you have 2 strengths. It just means that that strength is in more than one category. Does that make sense? So if you have maximizer, it's going to be blue and red. If you have analytical and deliberative, it's going to be gray and white. If you have strategic and ideation, it's going to be gray and yellow. All right. So, I would say maybe on page 3, look at your strengths as I'm going through this. So the first category is traction. So if you have a traction strength in one of your top 8 strengths, you're going to see the color green. So traction says, hey, I'm really good at starting things. Can we stop talking about it and actually do it? Let's get going, right? Green light, green means go. Let's get started. So when we talk about projects, let's make sure that traction individuals are going to help figure out what that first step is, that second step is. But we might know people in our lives that are really good at starting things, but they don't quite finish, right? They move on to the next thing without finishing. So we want them to partner up with the driving strengths, the red. So maybe if you look after your name, if you're looking for anything that's red. So the driving strengths want to get things done. It's the idea of having that to-do list and going from one thing to the next. So traction and driving, very task focused, right? We start things, we finish things. But we often want to ask ourselves, are we doing the right thing at the right time? Right? So we want to make sure we partner up with the seeing strengths. So now you'd be looking for the dark gray on your list there. So if you see anything with dark gray, the seeing strengths typically ask 2 questions. Firstly, is this in alignment with the mission, vision, and values? Yes or no? If no, let's not even talk about it, right? It's not a part of what we're doing. If it is a part of what we want to do, then the question is when? Is it an emergency? Do we do it this week? Is it by the end of the school year? Is it next school year? Or is it long range, 5+ years out? Right? So the seeing helps us see when we want to do it in a timeline. So we can start and finish things at the right time and place, but we need to make sure we're thinking about the people, right? If you don't like me, if you don't trust me, are we going to really work well together, right, as a team? Or are we going to want to try to avoid each other? Or if anything goes wrong, can we blame that other person? So the interpersonal is saying, let's make sure we think about the people involved. Let's think about LCCA. Let's think about the students. Let's think about the family as well as the community. So then the next category is lifestyle. These would be purple. So if you see purple after your name, the lifestyle strengths is kind of this orientation to life, to say, this is how I wish to live or structure or filter my life. And so again, if you have any of those purple, when we get into specifics, we're going to talk about what that means. The next category is wild card. So if you have orange after your name, so it's communication and learner. What we say is these two strengths are good on their own, but they're best when they're paired up with other strengths, right? So we all, no offense to anybody in this room who has communication, right? Talking for the sake of talking, not a strength. But are we communicating the right message to the right audience at the right time, right? Really connecting to people and sharing that message about what we want to do and what that future looks like. So again, wild cards enhance all the other strengths. And then the last two categories, problem identification, you're gonna see yellow. And again, it might be yellow and gray or just yellow. And then, oh, interesting. Oh, I'm missing a slide. Okay, that's weird. The next one is problem solving. So if you have a problem solving strength, you're going to be looking for a white or a white and gray. So I'm going to take these two together, right? So I have problem solving strengths. So I've always thought in my career I'm a good problem solver. But I've learned sometimes I solve a problem and it comes back. I'm like, what? I fixed this. What's going on? Well, I've learned that I need to partner up with people like you who have problem identification. You're the ones that are going to say, well, Tiffany, that's not the real issue. Let's dig in deep. Let's get to the root cause and deal with that instead of a symptom, right? So problem identification wants to get to the root issue, identify that, and then the problem solvers, which I don't have a slide on, but right here, problem solvers want to provide that solution. So here is a chart of just one example of how all this works together. And again, paying attention to the strengths, the categories that you have strengths in. So if you have problem identification, you're often going to say, this is the real issue that we need to address, right? If we solve this, it can solve a lot of other issues. So we get to the root issue, and then once people identify the issue, they're going to go to people who have problem solving and say, great, this is how I would solve it, based on constraints, based on people, budget, all of that. So people who are problem solving are going to say, this is step 1, 2, and 3 that I would take. And then they would partner up with the traction. So if you have the green strengths, you're going to say, great, I'll get it started. I'll do the first thing, the second thing, I'll get some momentum going. And then they're going to partner up with the driving strength. So if you've got red, this is where you come in. You say, great, I'm going to finish this, right? We're going to get this done. Get it done on time, within budget, all of that. The whole time that that's going on, those of you who have seeing strengths are going to say, well, let's again make sure we're doing things at the right time. Is this still the priority, or do we want to table this for later? The whole time, those of you with blue interpersonal strengths are going to say, all right, let's make sure we're thinking about everybody. Does everybody understand their role? Have they been able to ask questions, right? Are we thinking about all the people involved? The whole time we're partnering with lifestyle, so they're bringing things like belief, positivity, harmony, discipline, and adaptability. The whole time we partner up those of you with orange wild cards that enhance every area of the process. So the goal is to have all 8 categories working together. All 34 strengths, if you have them, working in unity to achieve your mission and vision in the most efficient way possible. I'll pause there. Questions, comments on that or anything so far? Does that feel complex? Does that feel doable? Does it feel like maybe you do it already to a certain degree in different terms besides strengths?
Is it possible that some of the strengths can cause roadblocks or deterrents?
Absolutely. Yeah. And as we go through all of the strengths today, we're going to focus primarily on the positive side of things, but we will talk about some of that, how they can get in the way, and what we say is there's some strengths that can butt heads with each other. And we want to make sure we understand that and we're aware of that, knowing that I'm going to talk to each and every one of you slightly different, just like you do with other people, right? Depending on what they need, right? I always say some people need, a pat on the back. Some people like a kick in the butt. I'm just like, just tell me direct, right? Don't beat around the bush. It's okay, right? And we all have those preferences, and this helps us identify that to say, okay, how can we understand some of those roadblocks or those blind spots and address them before they potentially get in the way too much? Good question. Follow-up question or no? No. Okay. Any other questions? All right, so what I want to mention too is, so we're coming up on 2 o'clock. I try to take a break every hour or so. So we'll go for about another 10 minutes or so and then take a break. And then I'll give you guys, about 5 minutes on the hour just so you have a chance to stretch and get coffee or water or whatever it is. Sound good? Okay. All right, so Lake Country Classical Academy. This is what you see on page 3 of your report. Now that we've talked about strengths being color-coded, just kind of looking at that, and if you've looked at the handout before we started today, does anything jump out at you?
Seems like there's a lot of lifestyle ones.
A lot of lifestyle. There's a lot of purple. Yes.
Little green.
Little green, yes.
Does it make sense that there's a lot of purple being a mission-oriented institution? That draws people
Yeah.
who are.
A little bit. Yeah, I will tell you, I'm not surprised to see as much belief strength as I see. That doesn't surprise me at all. I will say a lot of times we do see quite a bit of lifestyle. So the other thing that can skew this when you're looking at it is there are 7 purple strengths, right? And there's only 3 green strengths.
Okay.
So sometimes that can be deceiving.
Got it.
But I will say that's a lot of times what we'll see, right? There's a lot of purple, and not as much green. I see that more often than I see lack of green quite a bit. So we're going to come back to this at the end. But again, I always like to give you a little bit of foreshadowing, kind of some things that you might be thinking of that you might bring up as we go. All right, so the way we're going to do this, we're going to do this for a couple strengths and then take a break. But, so on page 3, I want you to be familiar with which strengths you have. So this is how it's going to work. I'm going to explain the strength, and then I'm going to ask you to stand up if you have that strength in your top 8. So, if you could stand up if you have futuristic in your top 8. All right, so I've got Eric and John. You 2 have futuristic. All right, let's stare at them awkwardly. Now you guys can stop. All right. Don't worry, payback. When we all stand up, we're going to do that, right? But I want you to start, again, looking at them and be like, John, futuristic, Eric, futuristic. Yeah, that makes, you might say that makes sense. You might say, oh, John, you just joined the board. I didn't know. Interesting, right? Trying to connect these words, these attributes with the individual. So I want to point out a couple things. Each slide is going to be designed like this. Remember, again, color coding. We do this so you all learn differently, right? Some of you learn auditory, some visual, right? Colors might be helpful for you. So seeing strength is gray, so you're going to see gray at the top, and you can't really see it, but it's at the bottom as well. We're going to have the strength at the top with the category or categories that it's in. We're going to have some detail up here, an image that can represent that strength, and some synonyms. I'm not going to read all of this, but again, feel free to kind of look there. And again, if certain things jump out at you and want to take notes on or ask questions, feel free to do that. So futuristic. People who are futuristic think about the future. I want you to think about a timeline, right? Today is the present. Futuristic, John and Eric are thinking 5, 10, 15 years into the future, right? It's the idea of, this is what I think could be. The dreamers, the visionaries, like what if we did this? So the reason we do this before the strategic plan is now we have a little foundation. We get this strategic plan to say, Eric and John, we want to make sure that we're talking to you and we're hearing your thoughts on your futuristic strength. Where do you see the organization 5+ years from now? And the rest of us who don't have the strength might be hearing them saying, ooh, I feel scary. Or can we just get through the rest of the school year? I don't have the capacity to think what could be when I have to think about what is right now, right? But then sometimes we have to take a step back and say, okay, that is our natural inkling to respond that way because of our strengths, but we don't want to squash their thoughts, right? And I will tell you from personal experience, my husband has a strength of futuristic. So I can give very specific examples of how I've known him since I was 14. Things he has said to me in the past have come true. I found a letter he wrote me 20+ years ago. When I read it, I was like, oh my goodness, this has all happened. And I never thought of it, and he didn't remember writing it, right? But I could have squashed his ideas there, but I didn't, right? I nurtured them saying, I don't know how I feel about this, but okay, we'll give it a shot. So just understand that John and Eric might have these ideas that the rest of us are like, I don't know if they could happen. But if we can trust their vision to say, okay, I don't fully see it yet, but I trust that, let's work towards it. 5+ years from now, you might say, wow, we achieved it. Or we didn't achieve it, but we got pretty close. We got way closer than I thought possible. So Eric, you kind of laughed when I said, can we just focus on the now? Do you find that for yourself where sometimes you're talking about the future and some people are like, can you just that it feels too far from now?
I laugh because I feel that way as well, though.
Oh, okay, yeah.
There are times when I would love
Yeah.
to think more about the future and, plan.
Good.
But the demands of the moment override that. So that's kind of what I chuckled in that moment about, is because,
Yeah.
and especially now, we all feel that pressure at the end of the school year.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you find yourself on occasion trying to dream, or would you prefer the ability to do that more?
I think there's enough time for it. I mean, we often have discussions when we reach a point where there's a decision to be made. A lot of times we look in the future and say, what kind of precedent is that setting, or is this the right decision for that to come true in the future?
Yeah.
So I think there's definitely room for it. Enough of it.
Good. Well, very good. John, I think you said you're always living in the future, right? It's just with the nature of what you do, adapting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think I view things as just having learned it the hard way. I think the downfall of most companies and teams is that they think that they have a mission or a vision, and they actually don't. So they have a nice sounding statement, but that's about it. And so kind of learn, again, a lot of times the hard way, kind of thinking about what that is supposed to be.
Yeah, great. So understand that, right? So futuristic, when we're working on strategic planning, that 5+ year goal, we want to make sure we're hearing from both of them to understand what they've thought through. Doesn't mean that the rest of us can't have that vision, but again, this is probably where their brain sometimes lives. So futuristic, right, 5+ years from now. Now we're going to go backwards, right, from the 5 years to say if we set that long range goal, where do we have to be about a year from now? And that's where the strength of strategic comes in. So if you have strategic in your top 8, please stand up. So Tom would have it, and then Margaret.
Strategic reading. I have yellow to do.
All right, you can have a seat. So Margaret has the strength of strategic. So strategic is typically seeing out 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, to say this is where I think we want to be a couple school years from now, right? It's this idea of saying, all right, if we want to be here, let's backfill. What do we want to do? What are the options? What's the real issue? Connecting the dots very quickly. People with strategic tend to be very fast into the future. So there could be a chance, Margaret, where you're talking to somebody and then they look at you, they're like, you lost me. Like, I thought we were on the same page, but you just like took these big leaps, and I was like trying to keep up and I couldn't, right? So strategic is thinking like, this is where we want to go, right? You're anticipating, you're putting together, like, I want to do this, but if this doesn't happen, then we're going to do this, right? So you talk about the hiring process. It's, okay, this is a person, but if they don't accept, then what is my plan B? And what am I going to do here? And if they take this, right, into this new role, how am I going to backfill? So again, when I see the faces, the laughing, I'm like, I'm maybe striking a nerve in a good way. So this is where I'm also going to say, if I'm talking about a strength in somebody, and you're like, oh, I see that, feel free to jump in and say, this is how you just did that. So, Cammie, I know you're like, don't pick on me, but
okay. She is 100% that way, and is always thinking ahead for the benefit of our school. But since we are in the point where we're figuring things out and hiring, she's been to talk to me once or twice already, with putting the pieces of the puzzle together and all of those things.
Yeah. Do you see that in yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wonderful. So again, as we go through, and if there's any strengths where you're like, yeah, Tiffany, I just don't know if I'm seeing it. Sometimes it's just so helpful to have people around who say, well, I see it, right? Because sometimes it's so innate in what we do, we just don't realize it. So again, I encourage all of you, again, some of you are newer to the team, but if you see that, feel free to jump in and interject at any time. So let's take care of one more as we go. So then we have analytical, right? So futuristic, 5+ years, strategic, about 1 to 3 years, and then analytical is about today. So if you have analytical in your top 8, please stand up. Just John, so I'll stare at John. Analytical, wonderful, thank you, you can have a seat, John. So analytical, we jokingly say hasn't grown out of the 2-year-old phase of asking why. I have analytical as well, so I'm making fun of myself here. So I ask why. You bring up a new idea for me, like, can you add this to your plate? You want to make a change? I'm like, why? Just help me understand the why. It doesn't mean I'm trying to be annoying, usually, right? I just want to understand, okay? So analytical, we get into the detail, into the weeds. We analyze trends, like the data is telling us something. So again, in my marketing career, I would track where I spent all my marketing dollars. And at the end of the year, I would look at conversions, right? So for me, I would put money in all these different places, and I would think that certain ones were more successful because we got a lot of leads, a lot of names, but a lot of them didn't really close, right? They were just people just curious. So the data always helped me to understand what the solution was. So I could make that better solution in the future, spend my money more wisely. So it's the idea of it's a show me strength. You see the detail, you see what you have to do today, tomorrow, and the next day to work towards your goal. And that's where problem solving and seeing come in. So again, I talk about these three first because it's a really good foundation for the strategic plan. Okay, especially with these three strengths to say, analytical, where are we now? Futuristic, strategic, have an idea of where we want to be 5+ years from now. And then the analytical, it's okay to ask why, to ask those questions. And we actually say conflict is a good thing. We want to have this positive conflict, this dialogue to say understanding from our perspectives, subject matter expertise, and strengths to have the conversation now so you've thought about everything and now you're going the right direction right away instead of going in one direction and then a year from now having the discussion and say, why didn't we have this sooner? Right? So it saves us time in the long run. So John, no surprises with analytical, right? No, numbers are your thing. And I think this is what you said too in our one-on-one, right? You're analyzing all the trends that you're seeing. It's helping you adapt.
That's my business, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? When you told me what you did, I was like, that fits, right? That makes sense. So the next time John is asking questions about why are we doing this, what's the numbers, the show me strength, the data behind your idea, right? You can say, I understand that's how you feel, Tiffany, but what does the data say to support it, right? We want to know that ahead of time so we're not, again, going down in the wrong direction. Questions on this or any others? Yes.
So on back to like the futuristic, and I don't remember all the questions that related to it, but
yeah.
Like one of the problems with a futurist is they can see things you can't, and then you don't particularly know if they know what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So, because you can't see it. Yeah. So my question is this survey designed to like pick up on not only are you a futurist, but are you skilled at it? Or is it looking at it paired like, I would think based on like what John said, if he's a futurist plus analytical, that adds more weight to his futurist.
Yeah, I would say there wouldn't necessarily be the tie with the futurist and the analytical, right? I do see a lot of people who only have futuristic or only have analytical. I mean, obviously we see a little of everything, so there wouldn't be there. So the assessment, it is designed to pick up a little bit of that, but it is self-reported, right? So, depending on how you answer the questions, I know every once in a while I'll get somebody who says, well, I just answered what I thought I was supposed to be, right? Now that the data is not as useful, it's not going to be as helpful, right? We'll see that especially if somebody's trying to get that next title, a promotion or something like that. But to your point, actually, I want to bring what you said, I actually want to talk about with strategic. So Margaret and Tom both have strategic. So they have an idea of where we want to be 1 to 3 years from now. They may not agree though, right? It might be slightly off skew and that's okay. But so I would say with the futuristic, there is a trust level, but there's also there can be a trust but verified, right? So I can, again, when I talk about my husband, there have been some times where he wanted to buy certain properties. He wanted to buy the dungeon house, you guys. I didn't let him. He still talks about it to this day. He's like, man, if we would have bought that house, it would have gone up in value and all this stuff. And I was like, I would never have gone in that basement. It was just scary, right? But I learned from it. So what happened in that is he had futuristic. He saw this idea. I didn't trust him. It didn't happen. And it's like, well, maybe I should have. And then there have been other times where his futuristic says, I think we can do this. And I trusted him. And I'm like, wow, I've seen a success. So you're right, meeting some random person off the street who has futuristic, you're not going to trust them, and I'm not going to encourage you to do that. But it's like, okay, well, I hear you, that you're thinking that, asking John some of those questions of like, why are you seeing that? And it can be very helpful. And so again, I think that I am glad you brought up the question because there's a component of I want you to trust each other, but don't be afraid to question each other, right? Does that make sense? Am I somewhat answering your question?
No, you did. Thank you.
Okay, absolutely. All right, we're coming up, it's about 2:05, so let's take a quick 5-minute break and then we'll jump back into some of the strengths. If you have any questions during the break, feel free to ask.